So as folks are getting settled into our virtual space here today, Leadership always makes an effort to start with a land acknowledgement, and land acknowledgements being a wide range of acknowledgements depending on where you are, the land that you're on, your understanding of the land that you're on. And so knowing that we're all coming from different lands today, taking a moment, if silence is fine or if a pause is fine, thinking about the land that you currently occupy, the folks who were on that land far before you, who the land was stolen from in order for us to be on it today, and honoring any thoughts around ancestry, generational wisdom, and other truth that comes up for you when you think about the land. All right, thank you. So, as you know, this is our virtual conversation series, but if you are new around here, we want to make sure you know what Leadership as an organization is all about. So, our mission is to transform the world by increasing the number of people who lead with integrity and a healthy disregard for the impossible. And our vision is the world in which that is true. So, our programs, we have our flagship program, the Institute, the 4-day experience, Catalyst, which is 1 day in living, and Possibility, which is now online around change and pushing the boundaries and this healthy disregard for the impossible. So our various student programs, staff programs, and sessions like these help us better meet our mission and vision for the kind of world we would like to be in. So with that, I would love to pass things off to Estee Hernández, our facilitator today, a great friend to me and an exceptional leadership educator. It is a treat and a gift to have Estee with us. So Estee, as you're getting your slides ready to go, if there's any way that you would love to introduce yourself and let us know who you are, please feel free.
Thank you, Juan. As Juan said, my name is Estee. I most recently have been an assistant professor in higher ed leadership, but now I'm pivoting back to an administrative role. So I'm in the job search as we speak. Have been an administrator for a very long time, and really have enjoyed the work with students, which drew me to Leadership. I've been with Leadership since like 2014, something like that, in different capacities, now a co-lead, and was super excited to accept the opportunity to speak with you all about something that I really care about, which is relationships. We think about networking, we think about what we need, and often we are told about how to best support our students. I really wanted this to be an opportunity where we could remember to pour into ourselves, especially in light of conference season, which I'm an introvert. It can be a really taxing time. So how can we be intentional about the relationships we do develop and cultivate or sustain? So as we think about especially our next career moves or professional moves, or really just any sort of competencies or experiences that we want to gain, if we're not necessarily looking for a new job, what are some new things I would like to learn? And so with that, I would love to invite folks to share via chat, or you can share out loud anything that you'd specifically want to talk about. Maybe if you have a question, an idea, I will try my best to get to that idea. If you're welcome to either unmute yourself to share that or to share in the chat. So I'm just gonna give folks a minute to do that. Something that you're looking forward to talking about today, an idea, a question, something that's, rumbling in your brain, anything like that.
While folks are responding, Estee, one thing that's come up for me lately is whenever I saw a lot of my friends during the holiday season, I realized almost all of my really good friends are from work, are from being a student and meeting folks, working in offices where I had high compatibility. And it was an interesting tension to introduce to by increasing thought that like work is not for friends, work is, labor, right? Like this kind of anti-capitalist other voice that has come into the conversation. And I'm like, but wait a minute, those are my best friends. So that is one thing I think about in the context of your topic, Esty.
Is there a way to add captions? Bethany asked. I believe so. Could you work on that one? Um,
Yes.
Thank you. I agree. As I think about the folks that I have closest relationships to now, like through my experiences in higher ed and student affairs, it's all folks that I've worked with in different like pockets, depending on the institution. Like I have this cluster of friends or this cluster of friends. And these aren't folks that are, these are folks that I like text pretty quick, immediately, or that I you know, drop DMs on their Instagram story, or, like these are folks that I really care about. But that is to say, like, there are folks that you work with, which, you may not necessarily have a friendship with, and that's okay. You just cordial with them, and you know that you just don't necessarily overlap in interests or passions. And then there are folks that you do that with, right? And especially when you're an adult, I tell college students all the time that it's really hard to make friends after you graduate. That's probably the biggest shock that I experienced after I graduated, and that you have to be really intentional about developing and cultivating those relationships once you work full time. Abby says, do you have a best friend at work? But yeah, now I feel like that question is really important. Yes, it is, especially if you want someone that's like a thought partner, as with regard to work that you feel that you can trust, and or just someone that you could commiserate with, someone that you could have lunch with. Like those things are important. And the relationships that you have with people, we know there's evidence that demonstrates those are the kinds of things that sustain people at work, right? Salary obviously is very important. Ability and autonomy over projects is important, but the relationships that you have in the workplace are really important, and they really cultivate the sense of fulfillment, joy, even purpose in one's work.
When I think about relationship, especially in the work realm, my jobs have always been centered around relationship with students, with other campus partners, being primarily in the higher ed realm. And when I started my first full-time job, I was very task oriented and like didn't really prioritize relationships. And then I started shifting, and the work became a lot more collective and collaborative. And there are people from so many different jobs that I still very much love. Do I talk to them all the time? No, but they've shaped me who I am as a person. And like, I think very fondly of my times at other workplaces, and I enjoy the people that I work with now. And then I have friends like very socially, I don't work with them at all, that I just get to like be around and be like a fully authentic, unfiltered self. So then I think about the difference of like, still being authentic in the workplace, but more of a filter. And then the moment I close my laptop or leave those doors, I'm like, it's unfiltered time. Let's go.
And I like the idea, Nash, if I may, of like this like filter. I used to teach a class on social media. That's an area of research that I have. And in media and in communications and in identity work, students always think about like, oh, well, you put on this face online, like your Instagram is your highlight reel, things like that. And I try to explain to students that yes, it might be the highlight reel, but you're still being you online. It's just kind of like how you uh talk a certain way to your family members or loved ones. You also talk a certain way to students. You talk a certain way to your supervisors or to a professor. You talk a certain way to your doctor. Are you being you all the time? Yes, but you kind of scaffold what you share, right? But you're still being you. And so that's something that whenever students say like, oh, well, you're kind of having to be fake or put on a face, or I hope you don't, right? Like, I hope you don't do that. You recognize that given the nature of a relationship, there's certain things you do say and you don't say, but you're still you, right? And so I like the language of a filter, that there's just some things that you maybe don't want your like casual work colleagues to know, but maybe your, best friend that came about because of now that you work together, that's someone that you share things that are different. So I love that. Thank you. Any other thoughts before we continue? I also wanted to reiterate, this is like a casual, I think y'all in the Leadership Central Office termed this as a lightly facilitated conversation, right? Folks, should you have the energy, you're welcome to unmute yourself and share a thought that maybe brews as you see something or hear something, or you can, pose a question or an idea as a starting point in the chat, either or, both and, or you can just continue to kind of just ingest the thoughts, right, as you best process information. I'm going to share my screen. This is how I wanted to anchor the conversation. And really my inspiration for the conversation today, if you are currently a campus partner of leadership, you might recognize this slide or maybe a version of this slide, because I could not find the newer iteration of this slide. This is like the former edition of Catalyst, which is a one-day program that we have for college students. I highly recommend it because it's for institutions that can't necessarily afford the full Leadership Institute experience. Catalyst is kind of a good teaser. There's still really tangible takeaways for students. One of which that I think is really useful is the concept of vital friends. Oh, no, I love your four-legged work friend, Abby. I do. Um, the eight vital friends is a concept drawn from Tom Roth, who is a scholar that also contributes to, what are those things called? Strengths, Clifton Strengths, and wrote a book about vital friends. And so you can just Google vital friends Tom Roth and you'll find it. But if I could quickly summarize, is that we all need different kinds of friends, or maybe not even really necessarily friends, but relationships, maybe like more, not like super duper inner circle, but still in your circle of relationships. And the words kind of make sense. You can kind of derive what each of the different types of friends are, but just in case, the builder is someone who encourages and pours into your strengths, things that you're already like good at, maybe has different ideas or ways to contribute so that you can, strengthen what you're already good at. A champion is someone who sings your praises, who is always there to hype you up, especially when you post your accomplishments or some recent project or recent win on LinkedIn, for example, is someone who's always going to comment on that post and cheer you on and root for you. A collaborator is someone with whom you work, right? With someone who has similar passions, interests, maybe contribute something different to the team, an area in which you don't maybe have a strength, but you need this competency in the work that you're doing, or you would benefit from this competency. That's a collaborator. A companion is someone who's supportive, who's always there for you when times are tough, when times are great, someone who you can truly lean on and be your full self, is what Nash was saying just a minute ago. A connector is someone who connects folks, definitely someone who's maybe very well networked in the field. And whenever you're at a conference, this person like, oh, you need to meet so-and-so because they also do this work, or they are also very interested in hiking and biking, right? And I know you really care about that. And, maybe they can share some, areas in the country that are the best for that. Just it doesn't necessarily have to be work related, but just folks with whom you might have a connection, that person who sees that and makes those connections that hopefully develop into new relationships, right? An energizer, someone who always makes you laugh when you're having a bad day, just someone you can count on for a joke, to lift the mood, someone when they walk in the room, the energy changes. That is an energizer. A navigator, a mind opener is someone who expands your horizons, offers you a different vantage point to see a problem in a different way. And we know through teamwork exercises that teams that work together, a collaborative approach to work, you end up having a greater result, more than likely, most often, because when you invite different thoughts into the space, you find that you get a richer product, right? And so someone who opens your mind like that is someone who does add this different facet, this different vantage point to a project. And then a navigator who, when you're maybe at a fork in the road, or you're at a point in time that could be a pivot or a transition or something like that, someone who could help coach you and really even just be a sounding board as you think about making important decisions that may affect you significantly, personally or professionally. Some of these roles overlap, like you might be lucky and have a person or two that fulfills different areas, but I would love to use this time either silently or you're welcome to, again, to unmute yourself. You can either share a person that fulfills some of these roles for you and the ways they do that, or if you'd like to share maybe an area that you feel that you might benefit from an additional person or a new person to fulfill a certain role for you. So either someone who does or something that maybe could be an area of growth for you.
I'll say, if I can offer that mind opener, if I'm defining it how we define it here, how you defined it for us here, SD, I feel like when I came into my current role at Leadership, I came from the corporate space. And so we didn't do things in the corporate world like how you do in a nonprofit world, like how you do in a higher ed connected world, like how you do in a world that cares about, you know, the world being better and not just more profitable. And so that mind opener piece of like coming from an environment that so often said, oh, we've already tried that, or we don't do it that way, or you have to get things approved by 8 people before you could do that. And then coming into a space of like, yeah, let's see if that works. Or yeah, why don't you talk with someone at this campus and see if they'd be interested in doing like that kind of mind opener space of feeling like good ideas were worth trying and ideas had good idea potential. Like that felt so good to have that in a work environment.
Thank you, Abby. I also appreciate opportunities where I'm encouraged to expand my thinking, especially in places and you know, different institutions and different offices have different cultures, right? And so it might not necessarily even be a consequence of corporate or nonprofit, but it could just be this particular company, right? Or this particular
Yeah.
institution, where some of us might be so deeply entrenched in the ways that we do things. Maybe it's an office that has a lot of history, a lot of tradition, a lot of, you know, folks who are lifers, you know, folks who have been in this work for a very long
Mm-hmm.
time, maybe really like the way they do things, right? And then there are instances where, you know, you work in an office that appreciates and wants to be that vanguard, wants to be growing. And even if there are folks that are lifers, they're like, I like to learn and I want to continue changing and growing and learning. And so I invite different ways of doing things from the top to the
Yeah.
bottom, right? I personally appreciate the opportunity to do that, especially when you're new coming into a space. Yes, humbly, you're walking in, you're learning, right? I like to say the first thing I do when I enter a new position is to just observe, to listen, to learn, before I interject or impose a way that I think is great, because it may not necessarily, it might be great, but it may not necessarily fit with the needs of the space right now. So I think it's really important that, you know, we are invited to offer our own piece or our own way of doing things, because otherwise it's like, why am I here, right? If you just wanted me
Mm-hmm.
to be a cog, right? That
Right.
doesn't necessarily contribute to a happy work environment. Oh, thank you, Abby. Andrew
Yeah.
shared um, Energizer and Companion. Um, I love that. Yeah, dad jokes. You know, folks who just, especially like in a meeting, you know, when you have a staff meeting or like, I used to work in housing. And so we sometime every other month we had like an all staff. So like, you know, huge 40-person meeting. And then, you know, we'd also have like areas, right? And where we would meet. And, you know, sometimes those meetings aren't the most fun thing, right? Especially at 9 in the morning on a Monday. But when you have a colleague who starts with a joke or who's just smiling, and the folks that are awake before coffee, I really envy that. But the energizer is just someone who's so important and someone who will listen to you fully and attentively and share in an experience with you like a companion is also really valuable. Thank you, Andrew. Any other thoughts? I especially would love to know if there's a person who's like, oh, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know that I have this person in my life right now or this person in the workplace right now.
I don't know that I don't have one of these roles. I'm just thinking about, so Abby, your comment made me think about the changing of fields and even what Estee been talking about context too. It's like I was trained as a teacher, which is a solo act, and then working on teams was very new for me because my whole training was about like it's just you and those kids all day long. So collaboration didn't come as naturally to me because of, I mean, and yeah, people can say, yeah, collaborate with your fellow teachers. Anybody who has taught before knows that that is easier said than done. Like you never have enough time, and curriculum sharing can be nice, but at the end of the day, that's hard. So I think taking more advantage of some of these new roles that I have had in the last maybe 8 or 9 years of work after I left teaching is probably more of my growth area rather than the absence there.
Thank you, Juan. Sometimes we do take for granted the growth opportunities that we have or the environment in which we work that is actually really exciting and nourishing. We kind of take it for granted. Uh, I think it is really important to take advantage of those things. And as we continue to work on behalf of our cause, our purpose, our students, the the populations that we serve. All right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I thought this would be a cool way to start a conversation with regard to building relationships. As I shared earlier, I know how hard it is to develop friendships or develop relationships, especially in a new working environment, or if we're at a conference and it's maybe a conference that we don't know anyone who's going or we haven't met anyone there yet. Would love to invite folks to share any strategies or approaches that work for them as they enter a new space and want to develop those relationships. So anyone have any ideas or questions?
Are you thinking around SD like I'm asking for some parameters here of maybe what I can ask about, and I have a little insight because you and I have talked about this topic already, but are you asking in terms of like, for example, like a networking event, or like how do you enter into a space like that as a shy introvert that's maybe new in a profession, or like that kind of, yeah, because when you and I were talking about this before, I know I was thinking about in earlier professions and younger in my career, certainly attending a networking event was like, I would rather melon ball my own eyes out than go to something called a networking event. Because that just sounds like there are expectations on you, and there's like a certain way you're supposed to behave, and you assume everyone else already knows each other there. I don't think I'm alone in having
No.
those preconceived thoughts around it. But now, as someone who recognizes that I really love story, I really love meeting people, I really love connecting with new people. Now you tell me that there's a networking event, and I'm like, that sounds great. What time should I be there? Like, I want to find the people in the room that seem like they don't want to be there, or they think everyone else knows someone, and I want to connect them to people or introduce them or bring them into a conversation. And so I think that when you're more comfortable in that space, maybe find the people who aren't and bring them in. Or if you're uncomfortable in the space, acknowledge that you are not alone in that feeling, and that maybe have a goal for yourself going into it of like, I just want to meet someone, or I just want to talk to people until I find that we have a mutual friend in common, or right, like just those little ways to enter into a conversation can seem so risky until you do it maybe, and then that's when you start finding the, oh, I also know that person, or I also went to that school, or I also attended that session today, or like finding those commonalities, I think help in building towards the vital friends.
Thank you, Abby. I am still not the person that enjoys networking events, but I do go to them, so I might not have the same response as you do. I was definitely and have been definitely the melon ball, my eyes out person. Now I might be like, I will go because I know it's good for me, even though I'm very, very tired from being on all day. So I don't quite have your energy, Abby, but I do find value in these events because that's how you meet people. And I don't necessarily, the language of networking is important, right? You want to use language that people know and are familiar with. Like you don't want to, use a word like you don't need to make it harder than it is. Networking works, right?
Yeah.
But I like to think about it as relationships. As I love the way you talked about stories, Abby, because I like to find the things that you have in common with other people. I have ADD, and so I'm not inclined to remember folks' names, but I will remember that they went to this school and were involved in this thing before I remember their name. And so I do love to learn about people's stories and connect with them in that way. So if networking, especially if you're more introverted or maybe you don't see yourself as super duper social, is that's a word that's intimidating for you as you say like, oh, networking event at ACPA or NASPA, that you maybe think about, okay, this is an opportunity to connect with people and to meet someone with whom I might have a shared interest or a shared idea, a shared goal, a shared story, and kind of work from there. Thank you, Abby.
Yeah.
Honestly, my areas that like how I start is usually like at the table of snackies. Like like, oh, that looks really good, or have you tried that? Like if there's someone else at the table that's getting little snackies, right? And just starting a simple hello. Thankfully, at like conferences, it's really easy to just say like your name, your pronouns, this is what you do, and and work from there. It might not be a relationship that will be sustained for years, but at least someone whose face you might recognize at a future event or session or conference, right? So
I'm definitely the type of person who, especially in new environments, I like to observe more than initially engage. I've worked at two previous places where the staff has been pretty big, and it seemed like everybody had been around a while, and I was the new kid. And so when I'm in a staff meeting or if I was somewhere else, I'd be like, all right, who is saying things that I definitely connect with? It's like, oh, that person might be my vibe. I'll get brave eventually to go like start forming a relationship, or maybe I'll sit next to them in a staff meeting and like make a side comment that'll be like, oh, okay, there's our point of connection here in this moment. And then once that phase is over, it's like you can't get me to be quiet. So it's a complete 180 from from my initial start to where most folks end up with me. But I think of, for me, I am a sit and wait, check out the playing field, see what's going on, take as much information in as I can before I act.
thank you, Nash. As you started talking about like big offices and how intimidating that might feel, that offered me a different perspective because I think of like big offices as like it must be easier to find someone who is a vibe because they're big. Um, but if they're bigger offices, the chances are there's somebody else that's coming in new with you, right? Just because of staff turnover and folks move up to different positions or away. But you're right, like if you are by yourself in a big office where it seems like everybody knows each other, it could be intimidating and overwhelming. So I like the approach of sitting next to somebody when you liked their idea. One time at a meeting, I was new. I think it was my first meeting. Someone said something that I thought was really important and interrupted what I thought was like a problematic behavior. And so I emailed that person at the end of the workday and I was like, hi, thank you for saying that at our meeting. I really like you. Do you want to go get happy hour sometime? Like I asked them out on a date. It obviously wasn't, right? And she was like, sure. And so that's how we became friends because I was like, oh, this person and I I think we think similarly, but it was literally just like asking them out on a date via email. It sounds silly, but I mean, it worked. And I was like, otherwise I'm just like gonna come into this new role and not have any friends. And I don't want to not have any friends. Um, so thank you. Um, Thank you. And if you do work in a space maybe where you've been for a while, it might be easy to take for granted that new folks come into, maybe if we don't necessarily think about our own offices or departments, but at the institution. I've worked at places that have had created a social for all new employees, like anyone who has just come in the last few months or over this last academic term, and inviting them all over. That could feel a little bit, kind of weird because it's like, oh, well, kind of like a forced connection, but it didn't have to be mandatory. It could just be an invite if anyone who would like to come, or anyone who's worked here a little bit longer but would just like to meet the folks that just started working here. I do think it's a way, one, to encourage cross collaboration across offices, but two, as a reminder that there are folks who are coming in and we have a responsibility to onboard them, not just in terms of the role, but into their social life as well. And because they're full people, we work with full people. Any other thoughts or ideas or approaches, that have been shared, like sitting next to someone that you enjoy and just bringing up a conversation, having a goal when you go to a networking event, to the, these like campuses, they have socials at conferences, a goal that you have for yourself, like introduce myself to 3 people today, anything like that, a tactic that you use.
So one thing that I would share, I don't know if anybody on this call serves in a supervisor capacity, or you're hoping to eventually serve in a supervisor capacity, but something that I've really appreciated with previous supervisors and my current supervisor when I first started in my role is that they took ownership in help me build those relationships with folks, whether that is with clients or other team members. So when I first joined the team, he put on my calendar either training opportunities or meet and greets. We're an entirely virtual team, so meet and greets were over Google Meet, but he put that on my calendar. Or the first time I went to a conference and I was helping assist at a trade show booth, he was the one that was introducing me to all the clients and people that he knew in the industry, and was starting a conversation based off of what he either knew about that individual or about me to find those connections. So I think because I've had that great experience, if in the future I'm given that opportunity to be that supervisor, I want to take that as something that I'm going to also mimic in my role, that like I want to be the connector for those individuals.
Absolutely, especially folks who are new to the profession, who are younger, who don't have the benefit of that network. We might take our own networks for granted if we've been in the field for a long time, and the connections that we have. And it could be really intimidating for new folks to come into a conference like that might have 10,000 people, or you're having like an exhibit booth and your folks are coming to you left and right. And sometimes folks, I know when I go to an exhibit hall, I go see my friends, right? So I go and stop by the booths of the folks that I know that are going to be there. But if you're new to the booth, you're like, I don't, can you introduce me to? And so being that person, I know I've benefited greatly from folks who have been those connectors in my life. And so I do feel a sense of obligation to pay that forward and connect folks, and especially those that shared interests, shared life experience, shared professional goals, anything like that. Oh yes, your treadmill desk. Yeah. I was gonna say, Brianna, like, yeah, you're out here just working, just multitasking. I will say that those are hashtag goals, but I'm gonna be really realistic with myself and probably not even put that in the air because that's not gonna happen for me. But I do like the treadmill desk. Thank you all so much. And so now I want us to invite, as we kind of turn toward like the conclusion of our conversation, would love to pivot, and as folks think about not necessarily the vital friends and the roles that we need in our life, but maybe as we think about next steps in our career professionally, maybe we're wanting to move to a different part of the country. So instead of thinking about vital friends in terms of competencies, what are some areas that I would like to focus on? What are some, whether it's connecting with people who live in a certain area or a different institution, or I want to start going to conferences that focus on XYZ, or I am thinking about earning another degree or a different degree, and I need to connect folks in this way. Would love to hear folks, to the extent that you feel comfortable sharing, what's the next step for you? And if you can, what is a way you can get closer to that step? So like an idea and then like an action item.
I love this question, Essie, because it's really timely for me. So my initial thought about what comes next with building a wider network is, at this point in time, I've been a leadership educator long enough to know where my niche part of the work is. Like, you know, we can do all of the general stuff, but like, what is really my thing? And I found the most amazing mentor because I've been a fangirl of her work for a really long time. And I worked up the nerve to email her. So I basically asked for a virtual date like you, Esty. And like, this is niche. Like, this is a woman who does leadership education at the intersection of veganism and ecofeminism. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. So now I feel like I have a partner to present with or talk about, or like, I assumed there may have been another one of me out there, but that's not a typical, like, you know, interest intersection in this work. So we actually talked a few times already, and I'm not sure what tangible products will come from that right now. I think it's just fun to have someone who speaks your language. And that for me feels like another person who sees me in the broader work in a way that I don't always feel seen. So that's nice.
Thank you. I would actually challenge that and say that the action step was you introducing yourself to that person, right? Like you're like, I want like leadership education is my corner of the world. But if I want to be more specific about that corner, ecofeminism, veganism, the intersection of that and social justice, that is my niche. Am I the only one? I'm gonna find somebody else. I'm committed to that. And you found a person and you connected with them. And that in and of itself, I think, is a great action step. And it may be an opportunity to present or to collaborate on a writing project. It may not be, but that first step of just like identifying someone else who has these congruent values is, I think, a really important and exciting step. So thank you for sharing, Juan. That's really exciting. Because I know how much you care about this. And
I remember seeing someone, well, I think we talked about it at the time, but someone had in their email signature, like the standard email signature that they had, they also had, here's the book I'm reading with like a picture of the cover of the book. And that felt like such a low risk but high interest way to say like, hey, do you read too? Or are you also reading this book? Or do you want to talk about this book? Or like, I loved that so much. I thought that was so cool. And I keep meaning to do it. I think I'm going to start doing it, Juan, if you maybe will follow up and ask me about it later. But I just thought that was a cool way to, like, is that networking? Maybe. And like, just kind of a way to toss something out there and see if that was a way for other people to feel connected to it.
I love that. I'm gonna totally do that
Yeah.
now.
I'll talk to you about the Brittany memoir.
And it holds me accountable because then it'll be like, Estee, you've been reading that book for about a month and a half. And so are you really,
Yeah.
really reading that book?
I appreciate what Brianna said too about carrying a book to a conference. I feel like I always have my Kindle with me, but I'm always worried about it looking like this topic is boring. So I'm going to get my book out. But I think that there's some ways that it's like, yeah, I also need to bring a book with me at all times.
That's awesome. And it's not even that weird when you have the book because it might have been that you bought it at the exhibit hall because
Right?
the publisher
That's
was
true.
there, right? It's like not awkward to carry a book and be like, oh, did you get that book here? Like, or like, no, I'm reading it. And that could just totally start a conversation. That's like a really, like, I think hopefully an easy entry point for folks to start that conversation. I mean, easy is relative, right? Like for some of us, that day might not be the day where I'm going to open my mouth for anything but food. But, you know, it could be just like, oh, I saw that book at the exhibit hall. Like, have you started reading it? Or, you know, I think that's cool. I'm totally going to write that down about book in my signature. Especially because in 2024, I'm trying to read more like books. I mean, I read all kinds of like random blogs and stuff, but I'm trying to read more books.
Jumping on the book train, for the past 2 years now in January, I'll put on my Instagram, drop your favorite book recommendation. And this year I actually wrote it down. This is great. But also who recommended it. And so I just finished a book a friend recommended. And I was like, oh my gosh, let's go grab coffee and talk about this because this book like was very disappointing in so many ways. Like not because it was about it. It was a great book.
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm so disappointed in what has transpired because of this book. But anyway, but my office also has this running list of favorite books as well. And so there's connection points there, like non-professionally, of like, oh my gosh, we both read this book, or like, okay, if you liked this, here's another one. And so another really good way to like maybe break the ice. We hired 2 new staff members in November, and we immediately shared our favorite like TV, movie, book, rec, doc with them to break the ice of like, okay, we strictly send Schitt's Creek gifts in our office chat. I hope you like Schitt's Creek. If not, we're gonna go through an identity crisis, but it's fine. Luckily they all watch it, so it was good. But it did allow some time for people to like establish a baseline of trust of like, okay, this office has some sense of humor. There's some levity here in this space.
Right. Yes, I do love that journey for your staff, Nash.
I also love that journey for our staff. So good. But back to the initial question as well of like some like things that I want to do or action steps. I'm kind of in a new functional area. I work in data analytics now and assessment in student affairs, which anybody that knows me probably wouldn't have assumed that this would be my realm. But it's actually quite incredible. But I don't know people in this functional area like I have in other spaces. And, you know, I've been here a year and a half now, and I've been to a couple conferences, and I know like the high level names of this functional area. But I think this year I am going to try to focus more on like, okay, who's not always publishing, but who's still doing really good work? How can I find them and see like what type of like equity assessment can we be doing better? Like, where's the new like practice that isn't being published that people need to know about? So I'm on a listserv that I know I can easily reach out to. I just need to do it, but listservs make me uncomfy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's fine. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it.
You don't have to, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
sending a message on a listserv can be really overwhelming because it both feels like you're yelling in a big audience that you can't fully picture, and also like you're screaming into a void. So it's like, is anyone really listening? Yet this room is full.
Yeah. Or how many emails am I gonna get back? Because when people ask questions in this one specific listserv, my email is blown up for 3 days. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be that person either. Like, can I just say reply to me only?
Yeah. Yes. Agreed. Excellent. I mean, no, I would have, okay, fun fact, I knew Nash already. And also, yes, would not have, necessarily referred a data analysis job to you. But look at that, growth. That is growth, right? I don't know. Any other folks that want to share either maybe a new competency area, a new conference, a step they're going to take as they start building and cultivating their relationships, or even if it's a hobby, like, oh, I'm starting to, like we just talked about books, like this is a way that I can continue to nurture that hobby. If not, a closing thought, something that you're still ruminating over, a takeaway from our conversation today, and I hope it was one that was timely for you, nourishing and valuable, but any sort of takeaway thought that you're leaving with this afternoon or morning, depending on where you live. I'm thinking about Mila.
I think mine is I'm reminded that to build community and relationships at work, it's probably so often not about your job. Like, we'll get to that anyways, but like, I need to know that you can quote Drag Race with me, or you can write like these are the things that turn a working relationship into an actual relationship or friendship. So I'm curious about that as I interact with new people all the time in my role, like people who I haven't met before, of like, yeah, we're gonna talk about the work, but also, what are your big 3 in astrology? Like, these are the questions that I need to know. So yeah.
Yeah, because I think so much when you think about work, it seems very like superficial, something you have to do versus the things you want to talk about, whether it's Drag Race or your big 3. Those are the things that I think make a relationship more real And if we're really trying to develop these more meaningful relationships, I do think that that requires a little bit of more like the things that are real, like your family, whether that's chosen family, loved ones, your furry creatures, your bipedal children, you know, and inviting folks into knowing you in that way. Thank you, Juan. I really love the book in my signature. I'm totally gonna do that, Abby. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna email you, Esty, and to Mila as well, like to make sure, like to hold like an accountability. I also want to see what you're reading, just as a point of curiosity. I'm also like Nash, I'm also always adding to my TBR. And so I like to know what people are reading.
See,
Ooh, a
maybe
Goodreads link. That's a good idea, one.
my Goodreads isn't very active because I'm not always reading on the Kindle. And if I'm not reading on the Kindle, then I'm not putting what I'm reading like on paper. So
I'm a
that,
competitive reader, so I'm putting it down.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So that could be. Oh, that's funny. One.
I like
Yeah, it's a good idea. That's a good idea.
that. Hmm.
But yes, I'm reading All About Love by Bell Hooks right now. A friend of mine bought it for me for the holidays. And so I'm about 2/3 of the way through it.
Nice. Are you enjoying it?
I am. I think of love as a central value, which is why I think the person bought it for me. And there's a lot in the book that I already knew, at least, but that's giving me the language with which to articulate what I already knew, which I think is really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So, if love is important to you and it's all the different dimensions, I recommend it.
I literally just added it to my list. This is my list right here. So yeah. I think in this moment, I'm very grateful and I am feeling very reflective of the relationships that have brought me to this point. Yes, Essie and I have known each other for a while. I've also known Juan and Abby for a long time. And that's what brings me back into these spaces is the relationship. I saw Juan's name a year ago and I was like, I have to go to this webinar that Juan is hosting. I saw Essie's name. I have to be there because those are the people who have shaped my life in so many different ways. Do I get to see these folks or talk to them all the time? No, I'm honestly very terrible at keeping up once I physically move a space, but I talk about these folks all the time. I talk about my time at the center almost every day. I'm sure my coworkers are sick of it, but it really did shape me those times and those years that we had in that hallway of, you know, getting to know each other outside of the work, but also doing like work that we all very valued together. And so, you know, I would not be who I am if it wasn't for the folks on this call, if it wasn't for the center, if it wasn't for me luckily landing that job at the center, I would be such a different person. And I'm so grateful for the energy that people have put into me. So lots of gratitude and reflection.
That was totally not prompted, everybody. We're
No,
just
it wasn't. I don't think Esty knew I was going to be here.
With that, that was a really nice way of ending. Thank you so much for that gift, Nash. I'm going to yield my time and give it back to Juan to close us out this afternoon or morning.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Esty. That was just such a nice way to end this series. I think talking about the competencies and supervision strategies and all of those other things we did this week was important, and relationship is the heart of all of those things. So I appreciated that this is how we got to wrap that up as the core of what we do as leadership educators. So thank you so much, Esty. Two announcements from Leadership organizationally as we wrap up. If you didn't know, we have a merch site now. And the merch, y'all, the merch is giving. So give that QR code a nice little scan and buy yourself something nice. I feel like I'm a walking leadership merch site billboard at this point because it's just all I wear and like the only cups I drink out of, the only beanies I wear, like it's just what it is. And I'm fine to have given my fashion over to leadership. So if you would also like to give your fashion over to leadership, please either go to that link or the QR code. And then our last announcement is Leadership's flagship program, the Leadership Institute. We are accepting applications for the cluster facilitator role. So folks who are interested in leading small groups of students at either of our 2 sessions this summer, one being in Massachusetts and one being in Illinois. So folks who are excited about being with college students, facilitating curriculum, and being part of a community with the kind of relationships that Estee has been leading us through describing all day long. Oops, there's the QR code for that. And those are due by midnight on Sunday. So folks who are interested, if it's you or anybody else you would want to recommend that to, there's still a few days to fill that out. And we're excited to see folks who are interested. So that is all that we have from Leadership for this conversation series. Thank you again, Estee, for all of the warmth and beauty that you bring to our space. And everyone else, I hope you have a fabulous rest of your Thursday. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.